Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Goolsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science.
Okay, well now I feel like all this pressure not to screw this one up, but here we go. So today I'm excited, I feel like I have to always say, to be here with our guest, Zak Danks, who is the Wild Turkey and Ruffed Grouse Program Coordinator. Is Program Coordinator the right terminology, Zak?
It is.
Okay, for the state of Kentucky, and he was a technical assistance biologist prior to that. You've been with the state agency for, was it 16, 17 years? I'm trying to put it together based off.
Yeah, just hit 17.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And I'm excited to have you on today. Thanks for joining us, Zak.
Yep. I'm excited to be here too, Will.
So can you tell us a little bit about, how you got to the position that you're in today?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Ironically, in graduate school, I worked under Dr. Bill Porter, who is well known and respected in the turkey research management.
I feel like a lot of our listeners will be familiar with that name for sure.
Right.
Definitely resonates with me.
Yeah, he was a super mentor to me, although I didn't work on turkeys under him. I studied moose in the North Country, in New York and Maine, but just a great individual. But I had the good fortune to come back to Kentucky and get a job as a farm bill private lands biologist, working with landowners, delivering technical assistance. Did that for 8 or 9 years, and then got the chance to do this job, and very, very fortunate. This is the type of role I saw myself in years ago, back a long time ago. I thought I wanted to be a big game biologist, and then I went to a public deer meeting in New York State and, changed my mind pretty quickly there. It's controversial. I don't know if items were thrown, but they could have been at that point. So. But turkeys and grouse, I like to bird hunt, so it really is a dream job.
Well, I was going to ask you, did the interest in turkeys rub off from Porter, or did you grow up with that interest?
I had the good fortune to grow up with it. I had a family farm, and I had several hundred acres to roam with my dad. So he had just started taking up turkey hunting himself a year or two before he took me, and I got a bird on my first hunt, and
nice.
It was it was one of those things. We got the bird right off the roost, drove it to school, showed it off to my buddies before class. I believe it was my freshman year of high school, so I was pretty ecstatic, So So I had a super love for turkeys after that point. As you know how it is, you get bit by the bug, but just very fortunate to have ended up and get to work with them professionally.
Do you do much grouse hunting?
I do, yeah. Well, much is a relative term. I don't do as much in Kentucky as I wish I could. Usually make a hunt or two, but every year we go to northwest Wisconsin, and hunt up there. Like any serious grouse hunter, you're going to go to one of the M or W states. I've always gone to Wisconsin. And love it. Got bird dogs, English setters. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Very cool.
Can we just shift the podcast to focus on grouse today? I'd be really interested in talking more about that.
Honestly, I don't think the audience would care that much.
Probably not.
We've been getting asked to talk about lots of adjacent topics.
Yeah. They're like little turkeys.
Yeah.
Some respects, yeah, they are. It's cool because, I grew up in the western part of Kentucky where there are no grouse, but there's quail. So I grew up quail hunting some with my uncle. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until college working in eastern Kentucky with our elk population out there that I, flushed my first grouse, and that's where birds are in the mountains. So it's cool, the overlap, but like Bill Healy said at a meeting I was fortunate to be around him in 2016, I think. Turkeys are not deer, and they're not K selected, they're not R selected, they're turkeys, so they offer fascinating aspects of both ends of the spectrum. So
yeah, they fit in some weird slot along that gradient, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is kind of cool because, I think you guys maybe have talked about it in various episodes or ways, but the open forest conditions that we in hardwood country, from at least in my state, central hardwoods, today we pretty much have closed canopy woods or fields. We don't have that woodland savanna, lots of disturbance. We don't have the level of disturbance y'all do down south in the pines. But that, I look at that habitat type, that kind of intermediate arrested succession, whatever you want to call it, is like a sweet spot for turkeys. And it's interesting, I wish we could get that represented on the landscape more for the birds, because I think they really like it. But
yeah. I think that's an important point. It's one we circle back to often, which is that, the suite of problems that turkeys face from a habitat perspective, they shift in relative order of importance as you go from one area to another. And it sounds like Kentucky, has a closed canopy hardwood issue in terms of turkey habitat. And then I would imagine most of your openings are probably dominated by fescue grass.
Yeah, certainly. Across the state, but the central bulk of the state is fescue. Certainly fescue landscape, but there's a lot of broken woodlands too, and so we have pretty high turkey densities in the central part of the state, because it's despite the fescue and despite the lack of the ideal brood cover, that kind of thing, despite mowing during the nesting season, those type of problems like Harper's mentioned on here, we still have pretty high turkey densities, because from a landscape perspective, it's kind of the ideal mixture. In the West, we've got counties that are doing very well and some that have seen some declines, but out there you get a lot more cropland. And in the East, it's continuous forest and mountains and reclaimed strip mines, which are kind of like the go-to honey holes for turkey hunting. But otherwise, it's a closed canopy system. So it's a nice gradient. We're kind of the mirror image of Virginia, North Carolina.
Okay.
So Zach, when you were talking, then it made me think about the history in the state, and I just wanted to see if you could kind of walk us through the timeline, like when were restoration efforts happening, and then maybe talk a little bit about how the populations have trended over time up till recently.
Yeah, sure. Of course, like most places, we lost all but our only remnant population of wild turkeys was in the area that's now the Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area, managed by the Forest Service. Back in the early 30s, I think, they started trying to translocate some of the birds from that area to some other, they were called game refuges at the time, across the state, central Kentucky, eastern Kentucky. We tried, so we tried several stockings after that in the 40s, 50s, early 60s, and didn't really see much success anywhere. We had a few birds hang on in the eastern Kentucky mountains for a little while, but unlike maybe Western Virginia or Pennsylvania, who, it's my understanding, they didn't completely lose all their turkeys, we did lose our birds in Appalachia, our portion of Appalachia, pretty much. So anyway, we tried those early movements of birds, and it really didn't work too well. The remnant birds at LBL were, horrible renesters, probably genetic introgression, just very bottleneck genetics. But things really kicked off in the late 70s. I think 78 was the first year that George Wright, so he's my predecessor, our first turkey coordinator, he started orchestrating the restoration effort by getting birds from other states, several states, from Missouri, largely Iowa, Mississippi, Alabama. Several states in the Midwest and South. Some of those were trades for deer and involved river otters. So he man, it's like you got to tip your hat.
I love that old wildlife economy.
Just do what you had to do, creative, make it happen kind of mentality, and success is really that it's hard to capture today. I mean, I thought about that. Like, if that were my job to get turkeys from somebody, go begging for turkeys, what do I got to do to trade to get them? I mean, it's pretty monumental, when you think about where we came from. So, but he got the restoration game going in the late 70s, 80s. It really kicked off, and all told, from 78 to 97, we released about 6,700 turkeys across the state, maybe 4,300 of which were from other states.
Mm-hmm.
So early 80s, we were able to start, we had grown local populations and were able to do with in-state trap and transfers. But yeah, I mean, it was a huge success story. And, kind of going back a little bit, our first hunting season was in 1960. But that was kind of a special hunt, and actually Harold Knight from, Knight and Hale, he, of course, Kentucky natives there, but Harold Knight was able to harvest a bird I think he was a teenager, I'm pretty sure.
That's really
in
cool.
that hunt. It's pretty cool. Then there was, like a limited hunt in the early 70s. See, my dad graduated high school in 72, which is how I remember we had a hunt that year. And I think we had like 16 or 18 counties open, but, pretty low success and low harvest. 96 was our first statewide. So we had a spring season in all 120 counties in Kentucky by then. And we were pretty much wrapped up with restoration around that time, certainly by 98, 99, 2000. And then, after that, we started seeing just the exponential growth in numbers and harvest. And of course, we added a fall season in there in the 90s. It was pretty limited. I think we went statewide with the fall season in, I want to say, 01 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Added a youth season in 01. And, just kind of steady increases through time. And then in 2010, we peaked. We hit our highest ever spring harvest at just over 36,000.
Mm.
So prior to that, we hadn't harvested over 30,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that 2010 harvest was a reflection of a topic that you guys have mentioned on here several times, is cicadas. 2008 was I believe it's brood 14 is, the name of the brood, but they're the 17-year cicadas that emerged in 2008.
Okay.
So, we just saw bumper hatch that year,
mm-hmm.
and by far a record harvest 2 years later in 2010. And so then since that peak, that fueled our population for several years, but we never hit that, never broke that level until last year, 2023, and we came within 1,000 birds of hitting that. So despite, recent concerns about turkey population decline in our state, as well as, most of the others in the East, Midwest, and Southeast, certainly, we hit our second highest harvest ever in 23. And then last year in 24, we hit our third highest ever. So over 33,000 birds.
Mm-hmm.
So, from 2010, when we peaked, we kind of had a, fluctuating harvest. And then we seem to have rebounded the last couple of years. And that's certainly a reflection of better hatches too.
So Zach, over that 14 or 15 years, what you're describing sounds to me like it was relatively stable, or did it decline and then increase again?
Well, if you drew a trend line through it, it would be pretty stable to slightly declining, but it ebbed and flowed on like a 3 to 4 year mini cycle, kind of after that, which is interesting. I remember I was at a Southeast Working Group meeting. It's probably 2017 or 18. And I was talking to Jason Isabel, who was Missouri's turkey biologist at the time, and we were comparing trends. And even though our, Missouri had birds longer and their restoration history backs up earlier in time, in recent years, the pattern of the trend was pretty similar, and it was pretty interesting how.
So they were like the ebbs and that cycle was mimicking what Missouri was seeing. Oh, that's cool.
Right. So we were talking about that, and of course, the fun is speculating on factors and synchrony and things like that. But yeah, it kind of reflects reproductive success. We know that. So our poults per hen, although I would say they hold a little stronger than the Deep South, certainly. It seems like Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina, Missouri. Well, Missouri's maybe an exception, but the states around us, our poults per hen, for example, index has been a little stronger than in the South. But we did see some decline, and then in the last 3 years or so, we've seen an uptick, and I think that's fueled our recent uptick in spring harvest.
Yeah,
everything else being equal.
Do y'all see like specific regions of the state driving those trends in poults per hen? Like are they kind of higher in areas that have more of a, like we were talking about earlier, opening forested matrix as opposed to areas that are just more dominated by forest?
Yeah, the last 2 years that's been the case. Western and Central Kentucky have seen the increases, whereas Eastern Kentucky, at least at a broad regional geographic scale, have not seen the same uptick. And whether that's what that's based on, it's hard to say. You can't really tell. I mean,
sure.
Weather and other factors hard to tease apart. But the one thing you can point to is Eastern Kentucky's got that more contiguous closed canopy forest, whereas there's more kind of a mixed landscape in central part of the state, western part of the state. So for whatever's been driving it, it's been realized more in the kind of western 2/3 of the state.
Yeah, I think the other thing that was interesting about that timeline that you just shared is, so you would say that, or I guess I should ask you, would you say that y'all's population, or kind of like the reintroduction phase, ended about the 90s?
Late 90s, by 2000, certainly we had entered the post-restoration phase, I would say.
Okay, because we keep seeing this timeline pop up in different states where it seems to be about 20 years after populations are restored that the peak in harvest is experienced.
Yeah, that's what we've seen too. We did an exercise in the Midwest a few years back, and Dan Kaminsky with Iowa DNR and Kent Fricky at the time was with Kansas Wildlife and Parks, and they took our Midwestern state spring harvest data and scaled it to proportion of peak harvest. And most of the states kind of peaked in their spring harvest around the same time, around 2008 to 2012ish, around kind of in that same period. And the trends certainly lined up very similarly. Of course, like I've just said, we've had a recent uptick in Kentucky. We participate in the Midwest group and the Southeast group because Missouri does that as well. We're kind of like both. But the Midwestern states have seen a resurgence in harvest the last couple years too. So it's interesting how the states line up, although the exact year, and maybe that's your point, Will, is the exact year differs.
Yeah.
But the kind of time since restoration,
sure,
pretty consistent.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking is with most of the Deep South states kind of finishing the restoration earlier, you tend to see that they peaked in harvest a little bit earlier. And if you look at, some of the information that's been put together, like in the symposium proceedings, when I know, Chamberlain and several others typically put together, kind of a synopsis of what's been going on in each state for each of those symposium proceedings. And it seems to be that, the declines are greatest in the Deep South. And then as you go further north, presumably, I mean, this is correlation, not causation, but that we're restocked later, they're peaking later and maybe aren't experiencing declines to the same extent that we are in the Deep South yet. I shouldn't have thrown that yet in there. It makes it sound foreboding, but
right. Well, I think even, it's pretty well established. Mary Jo Casalina, who you've had on here,
right.
She published a paper in symposium before last, and the new normal, talk about turkeys in the Northeast. And so, even though they did maybe the trajectory was a little later, they've already seen some decline, and that was kind of the point of that group paper she did with the other authors up there, other states, is that we've passed this restoration fueled boom, and so how do we deal with turkeys in a landscape that the current conditions of maturing forest and human encroachment, development, high predator populations, all the factors, so there's acknowledged decline in the north, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right.
So
sure.
Yeah. Just to your point about the may or will see, I think I'd say most states in the east have heard or realized some level of decline from historic highs.
Sure.
Well, Zach, I'm really curious. Do you already have the poult per hen data from this year?
I do, yeah. Yeah, we had another good year. So
did you see what I know that you had a big cicada hatch. So did you see what you saw 10 years ago or 15 years ago?
So interesting. So the cicadas this year were the 13-year brood. Next year in 2025, that's the one that we've really got our fingers crossed for. That's the same brood that emerged in 2008.
Okay.
So the one to come here in 25. So barring some twist of fate in the universe that throws these critters off
these days, who knows?
Exactly. That's why I'm trying to qualify things. But I have had my calendar marked for April to June of 2025 for some time. But to your point, we did see an increase in that area, and interestingly, so one of our turkey research, we have 2 research projects in our study site, was centered in the area that we had cicadas. And,
cool.
If you talk to our PhD student, man, I mean, she said it was deafening every day. That's in a relatively small portion of Western Kentucky. So the poults per hen this year that we saw did increase across Western Kentucky, but the figures I've got are more broad. But besides the poults per hen, kind of my statewide brood survey, she did see increased reproductive success this year.
I did see.
So we'll have another year of study next year, and I'm like hoping to measure this again, because as you guys have said, do we have a bug problem? As one who's been in the habitat arena for a long time, I certainly think we do, generally speaking, and these cicada hatches offer natural experiments, if you will, to sort of demonstrate the issue. Sorry to cut you off.
No. I had a couple of questions that emerged from what you were saying, and I did remember that they're on their social media platform. Somebody from that research group posted about the increased reproduction. I remembered that when you said it from that state. So that was cool. The other question I had is, why do you think it would be different between the 2 broods? Is it because of where they're at geographically, or the extent, or?
Yeah. So the brood that will emerge next year, that again emerged back in 2008, that affected the eastern 2/3 of our state.
Okay.
Ironically, I happened to be working as a private lands biologist in the far western part of the state that was not affected by it was not encompassed by the cicada emergence. So I'm living, working, hunting, not experiencing these cicadas like most of the state is. But next year we should see, a large portion of the state affected. This year's brood was really, 13 years that came out this year was really centered on a relatively small portion of Western Kentucky.
Okay.
But ironically, to your point, I don't understand enough about the ecology of periodical cicadas. I wish I did. It's fascinating. It's one of those things, if you had another lifetime to go back and, pursue some academic area, maybe that would be it, because it's friggin' fascinating.
Yeah,
it is.
But it's fascinating too, because there's going to be some overlap in these 2 cicada broods, even though one's 13-year, one's 17-year. There is some geographic overlap. I do not understand that. Presumably, it's got something to do with their historical distribution and whatever the landscape looked like or whatever was contributing to them historically, and then whatever has led up to their current distribution. I don't know, but it's certainly a fascinating aspect of the natural world that we see manifest in turkey populations.
Yeah. So there, where they overlap, there should be, really powerful explosion of turkeys.
I'm hoping. Yeah, I think that I don't think my research colleagues will mind me sharing this. And by the way, this is Tennessee Tech. Dr. Brad Cohen is the principal investigator, and his two graduate students. One is Sarah Watkins. So she's our PhD student. She had just awesome field worker and turkey person in general. She did her master's under Chamberlain at Georgia. But she documented a big uptick. It was like a 23% increase in nesting rate, 50% increase in nest success.
Wow.
What was it? Renesting was up 170 some percent. Brood success was up 30%. I mean, everything was up this year.
Yeah.
And if it's not due to the cicadas, I mean, I guess there could be something else, but my goodness,
it would be mighty coincidental.
It would be mighty coincidental. And, you think about it from I typically think about it as, the poults have all this abundant food resource and the predators have an alternative food source.
Mm-hmm.
But the hens have good food source too. And to the extent that helps her body condition, I mean, it probably factors in too. But it'll be really interesting to see next year, the final year of her field work, what we're able to document. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know the where the geographic extent of that brood is supposed to hatch next year? Other states that it might include? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah. I do. I actually.
I'm just thinking about other areas that it might impact, even outside of Kentucky.
Yeah, I think it does affect a good portion of the states surrounding us.
Okay.
Don't have that map on hand, but I know it's not us, and I've talked to other states. The cicadas that we got this year went up into Illinois, and maybe you and Luke Garver talked about that recently. I can't remember, but in 2021, so I was going to make this tie again. So last year, 2023, was our second highest ever spring harvest. That came on the heels of 2021, which was a better hatch in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
That was cicadas as well. That was yet a different brood of cicadas.
Oh, wow.
That had a much more, even more limited distribution in the state of Kentucky. It was like northern Kentucky or along the Ohio River, like our boundary with Indiana, because Indiana saw a fairly sizable, effect from the cicadas, I think. And I'm not sure about Ohio. I would think they probably bled over into, western Ohio to some extent. But so we got some cicadas on a limited extent in 21, and we saw a markedly improved hatch that year. And then we've gotten this year's infusion of cicadas and next year's infusion of cicadas. So I say this because it really does. It's like luck of the draw, kind of. It's a happy coincidence. But man, I do worry, because if you take those out, then we're just struggling, with the landscape being what it is. It's and all the pressures on turkey populations that you guys have touched on so many times, from forestry, agriculture, development, all the things, the predator populations. All I know is that when you infuse the landscape with a bunch of big, chunky, nutritious morsels of cicadas, it seems like there's a correlation there. And, I got to believe there's a little more than correlation involved.
Yeah. Yeah. All I can think about when you go through that is I want to increase insect diversity and abundance, as a habitat manager, to the point that I can experience and enjoy that 53% increase in nest success every single year.
Well, I was going to say something very similar, but in a different way. that's really intriguing to me, just the ecological relationship, and it's interesting to see this natural experiment play out with the pulses and resources and seeing that. But you ideally don't want to see an effect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's telling me that most likely they are insect limited, which means there's a habitat problem. And that is just like showing you the magnitude of the discrepancy there, right? Like when you add insects in, if they're insect limited, then you see this huge response to having that added insect. And
absolutely, man. I certainly think it is. And ever since you guys made that point, whatever episode it was some time ago, I was like, yes. I mean, that's totally it. I mean, again, having worked with private landowners, and I try to work closely with our private lands program and our public land managers too, whoever I'm talking to, the fact is, to me, having lived and breathed our landscape, is that, sometimes you wonder, like, how are these birds successful? Because, when they've got fescue that's mowed right during the nesting season, our good portion of our state is a mixed ag landscape dominated by fescue, and so that's either getting grazed or overgrazed or mowed for hay at just the wrong time.
Yeah.
And then in other areas, we're not doing anything in the forest to really improve conditions. And then in other places, you've got so much cropland that there's not even that much usable space for reproductive cover, nesting, brood rearing. So it is amazing to me that they can make it as well as they do. I think turkey populations are relatively strong here because our landscape is a nice mixed matrix. It's not all one for the most part, except in certain areas. It's a nice mixture. But that said, just the baseline condition they've got to be bug limited to a certain extent. When we know that reproductive success is so important, we got to do everything we can to increase it. So that's the first thing I talk about whenever I get a word in with a really ardent turkey hunter I'm talking to, or someone that's asking me what's happened to the turkeys. Well, lots of things. So let's sit down and have a conversation, lay out the trajectory of things, the array of factors, and just drill down to the fact that, predators would probably get you too if you didn't have a roof over your head, and you were having to rough it every day.
Yeah.
And particularly for those little poults or that vulnerable hen on the nest before the poults, my goodness, it certainly points to some issues.
Well, and I think, the information you shared with us a few minutes ago from the ongoing research, I had not heard anyone connect the pulse and insects to hen condition. But it sounds like the preliminary results from, the research with the Cohen lab strongly suggests that it's even influencing the hen. And
I don't know. You really need to talk with Brad. He's such it's so fun when I get to talk. I mean, you guys probably talk to your biologist, but I just crave those times when we can talk science, and brainstorm, spitball. But man, Brad's full of ideas, and it's really cool to be able to start picking some of this apart. We're in the midst of our studies now, so I'm always pretty hesitant to talk about the numbers because you don't want things taken out of context. But I mean, it does make you think. My goodness. And it's not just bugs. You guys just had that chestnut episode, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Imagine a landscape where chestnuts were perennially available to turkeys.
Yeah.
We were talking about Gary Norman before we started airing, and his work in Virginia, West Virginia, showing those linkages, fall harvest and vast abundance and turkey populations. It's I can't imagine if we had chestnuts. Where we did. So
consistently have 25% more than a good year of oak.
I mean, and so to the extent that it does influence that hen's condition, I mean, it just makes blows your mind thinking about what it must have been like.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't have strong data on that, but I mean, it definitely is one of those things that stands to reason that fall and winter food resource could definitely influence, what hens are able to do and what they're able to provide, for their clutch and their brood the following spring. I mean, how could it not?
Well, it starts to, help you reconcile why Boone, or I think that's who wrote about it going across Kentucky, but several of the early accounts described an open landscape with turkeys everywhere. And you think about those types of forest conditions, and if you have chestnut mixed into that, not only could you have high mass production, you have high insect production and good nesting cover and good brooding cover. Like, of course, there were turkeys standing behind every tree.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was a chestnut economy in that part of the world.
Yeah, it was
It
just,
tells you how
and,
how abundant they were.
yeah, and then they have apparently a cicada hatch every other year or whatever. So you're like at the nexus of every range or something come together.
Yeah,
Like that's a pretty good situation for a turkey.
Yeah, definitely, man. It's fun to look back at the historical accounts. What we know about Kentucky. If you look at the early explorers and the people that were writing stuff down, we had very open conditions. We had even in the East, even in Appalachia. It's the same here as it is in our surrounding states. But you could drive wagons through the woods in some places. Certainly, ride horses easy. Yeah. Probably the understory was variable. I mean, certainly, but in some places you could.
Yeah.
The buffalo traces, the Indian warriors' paths and things, those were the initial highways that people like Boone opened up because they were already established by early peoples and big herbivores, big grazers. And then you had fire on the landscape. Moving west across Kentucky, we had big barrens. We had, prairie landscape dotted with, woodland savannas. So, lots of places that turkeys were documented to be abundant. So I don't know. I loved going down the historical, mind exercise. It's fun to think about. But the cicadas, unfortunately, like you said, it's good. It's cool. It's certainly cool to document, and it's great for the population. But it is unfortunate that we have to rely on these accidents, these sort of accidents of nature to help give the turkey population a boost.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure it was Daniel Boone that was talking about one of his treks across Kentucky to the bluffs on the river. And he said he was describing the landscape as being open. I forgot the terminology he was using at the time, but it was striking to me because he said the whole trip he never got out of sight of turkeys.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, that imagine that.
Like, it's hard to imagine, really is. We, talk about cane breaks a lot. We had a lot of native cane, and that's interesting because a lot of places we had upland cane, not just, it's river cane, the species, but it's not always along rivers, it was upland. So it would have had to been maintained with fire and grazers and, for it. And cane, you guys know what cane looks like. It's hard to see turkeys in that, probably, unless it's being disturbed in this mosaic fashion. So, like that statement, that historical statement that you referenced, it's like, well, for them to be able to see turkeys in what was inevitably tall grass, tall cane, there had to be a lot of disturbance going on, illustrating this historical mosaic-y type land cover from all the disturbance. But it's just fascinating to think about the factors that would have fueled those populations, and then just how different it is today. Because today, I mean, turkeys are pretty much relegated to woods or open. They really lack the interspersion, kind of that probably existed historically.
Yeah. So you shared some of the preliminary results from that study that y'all are partnering with Tennessee Tech on. Can you go into a little bit more detail about the other objectives of that research?
Yeah. So that project is about the reproductive ecology, trying to really hit on various aspects of reproductive ecology of turkeys in western Kentucky. That area of the state was chosen partly because we've had turkeys the longest in that general vicinity, but also that's the area of the state that we have had the most, I guess I would say the most fervent and most frequent calls about turkey decline. So plus we've got a large area of public land, Peabody Wildlife Management Area, kind of form. That's where the researchers are based out of. But what I like about the research is it's not all public lands. Her birds that she's got on air are almost equally distributed on private lands as well. And private lands that makes up 95% of our state. So we need inference from private lands. So that's very cool. We're going to be, I mentioned, vital rates from survival and nest success, brood survival success. We're also looking at gobbling chronology in that landscape. And so we'll be able to kind of look at the interplay gobbling in relation to our season timing and in relation to nesting and some other things. In contrast, the second research project we've got going also with Tennessee Tech and Dr. Cohen, but also with Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency and Roger Shields, their turkey program coordinator. We've got a 2-state project going there, looking at it's a banding project, so we're trying to estimate harvest and survival rates of male birds. So we're coming up on Kentucky's 4th year of trapping, banding for that study. Tennessee got started before us, so this will be their 5th year coming up. But that's really cool to be able to look at both states because, if you look at our land cover, habitat, generally speaking, Kentucky and Tennessee are pretty similar. So it's pretty cool to have that joint research there. But then that's been a great experience, and we've caught in Kentucky, all told, between the 2 states, we've caught over 1,700 male birds. We're also on top of that in Kentucky doing a health study as well. So we're catching some hens, some female birds as well, taking blood samples and so that we can do a kind of a baseline health assessment, working with our wildlife vet here. So that research, the banding research, is across the state, which is cool because we get a picture from our gradient from our mountains in the east to our pasture land in the central part of the state and cropland in the west. So so that's kind of the 2 to 3 elements of actual formal research we got going right now in the state. So and I think it's sort of the impetus here again was turkey concerns over turkey populations, and of course the one thing we control directly as a state agency are hunting regulations, which we haven't touched on yet. We can in a minute, but we wanted to do the harvest rate banding stuff in order to kind of get at that both at our state level and in contrast with Tennessee, because historically Tennessee opened 2 weeks before us and had twice the bag limit, had a longer season, whereas we've been really consistent in our season framework for quite a long time. And back when turkeys were booming in the early 2000s, people were like, why don't y'all open up earlier and increase the bag limit like Tennessee? Whereas nowadays things have maybe leveled a little bit more. In Tennessee's seasons are in line with ours in Kentucky. All that to say that the banding study and getting at harvest rates was sort of the first step. And then we got the second project approved, and that's putting transmitters on hens and trying to look at the reproductive ecology, getting ARUs out for gobbling chronology. We've also got some tags on males as well, so we're getting some survival estimates that way from gobblers. So here in the next few years, I think we'll have some really nice research findings to add to the body of literature that kind of we've been lacking in Kentucky directly, specifically here, and then add to sort of this upper South, lower Midwest, whatever you want to call us, kind of in the fescue belt, right, hardwood
nexus
zone. So yeah, that's kind of the research overview of what we've got going. But certainly Dr. Cohen could speak to it a lot more, and but it's a great experience so far, and looking forward to those results eventually.
Are y'all seeing any trends in male survival thus far that are, well, I mean, I don't know if y'all have even processed that data yet, but Is it different than, some of the recent publications?
Actually, well, that's a good point. So I'll first plug the
And if it's too
master's
early to
student.
go into this,
I don't think
just
so.
tell
I'm
us.
not.
Yeah.
I think
No, I
we
mean
did give an update from the working group on the presentation that was given on
yes,
on one of the
yeah.
episodes.
So right at that meeting you're talking about, that was Abby Riggs. I wanted to be sure to mention her. She's our master's student that's processing the Kentucky-Tennessee data on harvest rates. And so far, it's very much in line with that, Whiteman summary and, basically what we're finding across the Southeast. That 30% harvest rate seems to be pretty much the norm here. We're just shy of that, like 26-28% here in Kentucky. But it's it's pretty close to that, at least preliminarily speaking. She's got a lot more analyses to do, to incorporate landscape factors and other covariates to her modeling. But at least that's kind of what the estimates are showing so far. So that's pretty interesting in and of itself, because again, in Kentucky, our regulations are have been a little more conservative than maybe the rest of the Southeast. We've started later, lower bag limit. We're pretty similar to Missouri, I guess I would say. We start our season starts the Saturday closest to April 15th. So it's generally the middle of April. And we got a 2-bird spring limit, and it's a 23-day season. So there's 4 weekends essentially, but that runs through like the first full weekend in May. So it's interesting to see our harvest rates be so consistent with
and what's the fall
Southeast. But
what's the fall season structure like?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yep. So currently in the fall, it's a 2-bird limit total, only one of which can be basically a bearded bird. The other one is a non-bearded bird. So generally that's a male or a hen, although, you could harvest a bearded hen. The regs are actually written as one of those 2 birds has to have a beard over 3 inches. The other has to have it under 3 inches.
Okay.
And that's pretty consistent with how our regs are. It's generally based on beard length and harkens back to early days of reg setting when people weren't as familiar with, sexing birds. But that's actually down until that went into those fall regs went into effect in 2023. Before that, we actually had a 4-bird fall limit, and nonetheless, our harvest has never really been super high. Interest in fall hunting peaked in the late 2000s. We started adding a lot of opportunity, and there was kind of a novelty, but it's fallen off. In recent years, we're harvesting about 1,000 birds in the fall statewide.
Okay.
60% of which are hens. So that fall season is what a lot of hunters who are really concerned about turkeys come at us with almost off the bat. And certainly you guys have talked about it. Chitwood's work and lots of other advocates for either reining in fall harvest of hens in general, whatever. But when you look at it at county level, I mean, we're just harvesting so few birds. It's not seemed necessarily necessary to take away opportunity from the few people who actually do take fall turkey hunting serious. Our commission had some proposals in front of it to reduce the season, eliminate harvest of hens, and they chose not to enact those regulations. So we lowered the bag limit, but essentially we're still harvesting around 1,000 turkeys in the fall. So the other kind of interesting thing is, in terms of fall, of course, the bulk of those 1,000 are taken with shotgun, and we have 2 separate week-long fall shotgun seasons. A little confusing, but the last Saturday in October for 7 consecutive days, and then the first Saturday in December for 7 consecutive days. So unlike Missouri, which, unless things have changed, I think they used to be like the month of October you could harvest birds with a shotgun. Ours, again, it's a relatively succinct shotgun season. Now, of course, we have a long archery season, vertical bow season, and then we got a lot of days of crossbow as well. Crossbow is not concurrent with archery, regular archery, but it's still a lot of opportunity there. But the other thing in our state that I guess I'll say is that it is legal to hunt deer over bait in the fall. It is not legal to hunt turkeys over bait in the fall. And so if you give the majority of turkey hunters the benefit of the doubt and say that they're following the regulations, then a lot of people probably have been dissuaded from turkey hunting in the fall because of this bait on the landscape, but also because we're a big buck producing state too. So most people in the fall have deer hunting on their mind. Right. So fall hunting is just not that popular. So all that to say, we certainly are concerned about fall hunting and monitoring it, but it just doesn't seem like, even if we eliminated fall harvest totally or harvest of hens, not so sure it would change things. I mean, there's other states, a lot of the southeastern states don't even have fall seasons, or very limited fall seasons, even compared to ours. And, it seems like our populations are faring no worse than some of those states that don't have a fall season. So,
yeah.
Zach, one thing that I keep getting asked about and comes up commonly when we're talking about this. In fact, I think even with some of our biologists here have had this discussion with 1,000 birds over the size of Kentucky is basically nothing. And, also presumably some of that mortality is also compensatory. So in other words, some of those hens would have died of something else anyway.
Right.
But I'm curious, you said, I forgot exactly what you said, but maybe 90 to 93% or something like that's private land. Are most of those hens getting killed on private land, or do they get concentrated in the public land opportunity?
That's a good question. I guess I'd need to break that down, but I still think the majority is on private lands, even though it's really diffuse, just by nature. I mean, I'm sure a decent portion of them come off of public land settings, but I can't say offhand.
Yeah, I was curious if you knew, because I keep getting asked, like if you had a management area, let's say it's 10,000 acres, and you killed 100 hens on that, well, that could be a big thing, even though at the county level it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
But people keep asking me some variation of that question, and I haven't heard of anybody that had data to kind of quantify what the distribution looked like, I guess.
Honestly, it's just something I've not delved into that enough that it's on the fore in my mind, but certainly can pick it apart because it is interesting now that you say that. Need to look at that. I can certainly look at that because that's the other thing I'd mentioned. We're fortunate to have had mandatory harvest reporting, telecheck in place since 2000. So often when I show harvest totals, I start there just to make the data comparable. But the other thing about it with that long time span is it's instituted in our hunting culture now. So while certainly there's some level of underreporting, it's not like some states that have instituted this more recently, and they're kind of trying to match up the telecheck numbers with their historical methods of harvest estimation from surveys or whatever. Ours has been pretty consistent for a long time. So I'm able to go back and look at that and see kind of where the distribution of fall hen harvest is on public or private. So I'll have to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear about that too, Marcus. I've never heard anybody pose the question that way, but it does seem like it's something that would be interesting to look into.
All of the people that I have been asked about that have been in Florida, so I don't know that necessarily is something that people are thinking about elsewhere, but for some reason.
Well, we just exported it, or you did.
Well, in Florida it's a little bit unique because we have so much public land for the Southeast, and there's so many public land opportunities, and maybe that's why people are asking about it here.
What's Florida's fall fall harvest like? I don't even recall that all.
It's really low. There is an opportunity, and I think it's either sex. But honestly, I don't even know because I don't participate in it.
Right.
But it's the harvest is really low.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't recall the numbers right off the top of my head.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I'm certainly cognizant of the super hen hypothesis and, the risk you run, I guess. But again, it just, when you are talking about the scale at which we manage, as an agency, again, like it's kind of hard to justify right now based on the data we have. I mean, fall harvest rates are very low in the places that I've seen estimates, so it's, I got to believe it's just while certainly a concern, it's, to me, the fall take of hens pales in comparison to the hens that are lost on the nest and the poults that are never produced or that are lost. If you take that bulk of opportunity cost from the way we manage land, it's just dwarfs anything we're doing with fall harvest.
It's a drop in the bucket.
And you want to seriously consider, you don't want to just, on a supposition take away, a tradition that is important to, maybe you don't have that many people participating in it, but it is a long-standing tradition that is very important to a lot of people.
Well, and I think that proves the point. The fact we don't have that many people participating, what kind of effect are they having?
Right.
And, when this was being discussed with our commission just a few years ago, we had some folks, some ardent fall turkey hunters come forth that honestly I had never interacted with, and these are fall dog hunters.
Yeah.
So like probably a lot of places that have fall seasons, it's legal to hunt with dogs.
Right.
But man, there's a subculture there. Appalachian turkey dogs are a thing.
Yeah.
That's so cool to me because I have English setters.
I totally
and
agree.
A lot of these Appalachian dogs they have setters in them and other stuff, but like, how are you going to take away that opportunity to folks who look forward to a certain time of year and they're not having a huge impact? Again, I'm a bird hunter, man. I grew up around quail hunters, so it's like, I don't know. I kind of look at fall turkeys, that type of fall turkey hunting in a similar vein.
Yeah.
It's got a neat tradition in Appalachia.
Right.
I definitely am an advocate of opportunity myself. If it's not having a detrimental effect.
Yeah. I mean, as long as our seasons are set sensibly, and again, we have already had, among the most conservative spring regulations. Even so, we're trying to measure harvest rate, get a pulse check on that. I feel like our regs are pretty dang sensible, but we'll see. Once this research wraps up, and what, can't say for sure what'll come, but down the road. But certainly, we look like we've had a couple great harvests of late, kind of poised to have another good season here in a few years. 2027. I mean, I am kind of holding my breath for that one.
Yeah.
So it's just again, I always try to bring this back to habitat because whoever I'm talking to, they either control land themselves or they know somebody that does. And to the extent they can maybe grasp a little bit of the habitat connection, realizing predators are certainly the proximate cause that, takes out those birds. You guys have touched on it, some of the cool studies that have documented predator occurrence in relation to, habitat management, fire and whatever. I mean, those kinds of things are fascinating.
Yeah.
So,
well, to kind of reiterate this and make a point, I mean, do we want to have to worry about whether or not we have a hen harvest in the fall? If we are producing tons of turkeys and we have really good habitat and they're productive, then it's a moot point. It doesn't even matter.
Yeah. Again, back in the late 2000s, when population was growing, we were increasing fall opportunity then, and we weren't worried about it.
Yeah.
And, it just stands to reason that if that reproductive success is up there, anything we can do at the property level, I mean, that's your best benefit. And you want to tack on trapping, go right for it, man. We already have months of trapping opportunity here.
Yeah.
But without a fur market, it's up to individuals to undertake that predator trapping on their own and go for it, encourage it. Yeah. Great recreation. Just, people have got to realize the scale spatially, temporally. We're talking years of intensive effort to maybe document a success. That's if you have the habitat in place. So, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, to circle back, to the regulations, I think an important point to make is that you have lots of reasons to believe that they're reasonable. But on top of that, you're doing the work to make sure that they are, so they seem like they're fairly conservative and reasonable, and like the fall harvest of hens in particular seems to be nominal. But then you're layering the research on top of that to make sure that your logic does stand to reason. You're holding that up and evaluating it and making sure that y'all know the current vital rates.
Yeah, I think so. I hope we can continue to do that because nobody knows what the future will hold.
Yeah.
So kind of assessing what we've got right now makes a lot of sense. And I don't know how much you've talked about commissions and sort of the way agencies operate, but hats off to our commission for, sort of not enacting a whole lot of regulatory change. I mean, I think we've probably been among the most stable, certainly in the Southeast, in terms of turkey regulation changes. And that is, a product of our commission listening to what, myself and technical type people say and kind of riding this out and allowing us to do research and put some numbers behind the, augment our harvest totals and things that we already have. Like, let's get some data that assesses this. So, the only other spring change we did do might be worth mentioning is just that we haven't changed our statewide spring bag limit or timing, but we did move to one bird on public lands. So on any given public land, so you can harvest both of your birds on public. They got to be on different WMAs.
Yeah.
So that's the only spring change that we've made of consequence. But again, our relative to the statewide harvest, the public lands harvest is pretty limited. But the thought here is that hopefully we're spreading that pressure out. So
yeah,
hopefully the research will come at that. But yeah, it's like I said, you guys live it every day with the research world, but it is gratifying to be able to, as a state agency biologist, to be able to facilitate research that is directly informing management. I mean, it's cool to research these little tangential topics, but this is stuff directly related to management, which is it's pretty cool. And you got, students that are getting their degrees, and, you guys are advisors, so you're making a difference on the future makeup of our profession. So pretty cool. So.
We're making a difference. I don't know if it's always a good one on my behalf.
Don't talk about your students that way, Will.
Well, I'm glad to learn more about turkeys in Kentucky today because, I was trying to do a little background prep, and I searched wild turkeys Kentucky, and everything that came up was about bourbon. So I had to talk directly to you to learn anything about them.
We could talk about that as well.
We certainly can. Yeah, we could do it professionally in all seriousness, related to white oak and stuff, or we can talk about it less serious. It was very cool. We were trapping birds last winter, and it just dawned on me. I looked up. We had released a bird that we just banded, and I looked up, and literally, Wild Turkey Distillery we're looking at it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
we're in a bottom look on the other side of the river looking at it, and I've got Woodford Reserve just down the road, 5 minutes away from me. Buffalo Trace. I mean, all of them are ironically spitting distance of where we got birds, being researched here, and it is cool.
That's really
cool legacy and everything. I don't know if you guys are bourbon drinkers, but it's pretty cool.
Maybe there's a
correlation. Come to Kentucky any day you come to Buffalo Trace Distillery, you'll see parking lot full of license plates of states from all over.
So, yeah,
that's cool.
Bourbon and basketball. That's about what we're good at, here in this state, at least sometimes.
Y'all kill a lot of turkeys too,
Yeah,
we are.
Yeah, starting to sound pretty good.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's the thing. We haven't talked about non-residents, but like everywhere, probably non-residents get a bad rap, but I think Adam Butler has talked about that, the big, influx of non-resident pressure and interest in his state, but Mississippi, but they're increasing here too. Kind of.
I bet
the harvest is ticking up with non-residents, and is that a good thing, bad thing? I mean, obviously it's eye of the beholder, but opportunity is opportunity, and the real question is, are we growing enough turkeys? I certainly love turkeys and would love to hunt them in another state, so I've never felt like penalizing non-residents who want to come here and take advantage of our flock.
Well, Zach, I feel like we have covered a lot of ground. Are there any things that we should have asked you about, or that we haven't talked about that you think we should?
Oh, probably not. I don't know. Can't think of enough. I tried to hit the habitat message as much as I can because that's important. I think it's important to you guys too.
Absolutely.
Based on your career trajectories. So that's turkeys are generalists, but man, they're pretty specific when it comes down to certain life stages. So I think it's just a point worth repeating every chance we get. And I don't know, just appreciate what y'all do with the podcast, trying to get the word out, looking at all the different issues and avenues of research and concern from our constituents.
Yeah, and we appreciate you guys that are out there doing the work on the ground too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We can sit here about it and talk. We can sit here and talk about it all day, but unless there's people putting it
putting it on the ground,
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, appreciate y'all. Takes all the cogs in the wheel.
Yeah, it really does. It's that I'd say I might have said it earlier, but that's some of the most gratification I get is talking with my colleagues in other states. Just hearing their situations and learning about their unique situations, commiserating about the common issues, sharing in common successes, but it boils down to a lot of smart people, smarter than me, I get to rub elbows with, academics included. And, I just hope that I wish that the turkey hunting community could realize the level of interest and genuine
passion, dedication
that most of the biologists bring to this.
Yes,
it's we want it just as bad as you do.
Yes,
we hear and feel what you're saying, and that goes with grouse, rough grouse, my other species. We just kind of started out talking about them, but my goodness, you talk about pulling at your heartstrings when you hear about grouse population decline in Appalachia, because man, just a generation ago, folks could go out and have a decent to good day in our part of the world. And now those people or their kids, they're younger, my generation, we've got to travel hundreds of miles north to get to the core of the species range to really have a fun, reliable hunt experience, and it's just complex, but man, it's a labor of love. So I don't know, it's pretty fascinating, and all that to say, just super appreciative of the body of research, the community of management effort going into turkeys. I just hope that folks can realize that, and got to thank the landowners that are doing good work themselves. Whether it's habitat improvements on their own, or maybe they're encouraging their neighbors or the landowners they lease from to do stuff. Do something besides pour corn out. Do
anything
something besides
anything.
The bandwagon. Do something related to the landscape that turkeys have to inhabit.
Right. That's good stuff.
For sure.
We appreciate your time today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Zach. It's really fun talking to you and catching up on that. And I know our audience will appreciate it. We've gotten quite a few requests to talk about Kentucky, so we were glad to have you, and we'll have to do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, we will. I don't know if y'all remember us bowling here a couple years ago, Oklahoma, but I don't remember either any of us having a very strong bowling game. But
oh no,
I was going to say I thought I remembered you beating me pretty bad, pretty soundly.
I don't know. I don't know about that, but
I don't even need to remember to know you beat me.
Well, it's hopefully we'll have us a meeting down here. One of these years, Kentucky will come back up in our working group cycle, and we'll have us a little bourbon sampling.
Well, if I didn't put my bumpers up on my lane, it would have been even worse.
We're going to have to revisit this bowling thing. Maybe we should do the bourbon tasting and then do the bowling.
Ooh, there we go. We definitely need some bumpers in. Bourbon bumpers, probably. Yeah.
I don't know. It might make me better. I don't think I can get any worse.
Yep. It might.
Well,
appreciate it, guys. It's been a fun time.
Yeah, likewise, and I look forward to getting to spend some time with you sometime in the near future. But thanks everybody out there for listening. We appreciate all the support, and keep coming with the questions and topics that you want to listen to. We'll try to keep going after them. So thanks, Zach, for coming. This was one of the popular listener requests, so we were glad to get to talk to you about it.
Yeah, thanks, Zach.
You bet. Thanks again, guys.
Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University podcast network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.